And she was there with my phone. Okay. Yeah. All right. Everyone good? And just Michele is.
So Michelle's supposed to be on.
Is Michele on Zoom?
She's gone.
Did she get a waiver?
She did get a waiver.
She doesn't seem to be there yet.
She doesn't. Okay. Well, I
She's
think
sick, so maybe.
You know, I do.
We have to announce the purpose
she's
of
sick.
the waiver.
Yes, she is promoting her right now.
Great. And
She accepted.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Was she able to get promoted? Ah, there we are. Okay.
And Michelle.
Hi, Michele. Can't you hear us?
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Welcome to the Preservation Committee for Manhattan CB7 for Thursday, November 14th. The first thing we'll do is adopt the agenda for 1000 Fifth Avenue, the Metropolitan Museum, and a window replacement 322 West 72nd Street, and then new business.
Adam, I have a suggestion.
Yes.
If I might, I know that the window replacement was listed second on the agenda, but it is a much less complicated thing. It's extremely similar to one that we have previously dealt with, and I have it in my own building a couple of years ago, where
I think
and maybe we could take that first.
in general, I think we're gonna go in order of the agenda.
In general,
We
we do,
have folks on
yes.
Zoom as well, so we're just gonna go in the order of the agenda as it's written. So with that, if we want to pass it over to our first applicant.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, hi. Sorry, the computer was, oh, there we go. Okay, hi. Thank you. It's nice to see you all. My name's Brett Geyer. I'm the head of capital planning at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We've met many of you and come before you a few times already. So thank you for making the time. I do understand that you have a second agenda item, so we will try to explain this as briefly as we can, even though it is a complicated project, and save time for questions. So I am here from the Met, and I'm joined by our architecture team, Michael Whetstone and Henry Miller from Beyer Blinder Bell, and Nathan Rich from Peterson Rich Architects. We will each kind of talk through the presentation, but Henry, maybe we can go to the next slide. If that's working. I think you're muted, Henry.
So I advanced it. Can you see that?
No.
All right, I'll stop sharing and reshare.
That's okay. I'll just start talking to say so while we're figuring it out. So as you all know, we are an individual exterior landmark. And so every time we make a change on the exterior of our building that's significant, we go to all 5 community boards and to a public hearing at landmark. So just the way this is shaken out, you are the last community board that we're going to. So we've already been to the other 4 community boards surrounding the park with this project. We are also an interior landmark in the Great Hall. We are going to talk about 2 projects tonight. These are mostly interior projects that are outside of the interior designated landmark, but there are 2 elements to these projects that are on the exterior of our building that can be seen together. So that's why we're talking about it together, even though they're 2 separate projects. The 2 projects are both mission-driven work that are incredibly important to us. One primarily focused on accessibility, and the other sustainability and resiliency. So the 2 projects are the restoration of the 83rd Street entrance doors. And as you'll see, these are doors that used to be there that we would like to bring back. There is one door already there, and we would like to add the 2 doors on either side. And what this will allow us to do is to provide a fully accessible entrance from the plaza level. And then the interior work that is outside of the interior designated space will allow us to have a direct connection through a new stair and elevator adjacent to the Great Hall. So visitors will be able to come in at 83rd Street and move through this new public realm, access visitor amenities, food service, retail, and ticketing in the Great Hall. And this will really help reduce congestion. If you've ever been to the Met on a busy day off the plaza, it's hard to get in. So that's one of our hopes. The second project is the replacement of the Northside chiller plant. This is mission critical, as Michael Whetstone will explain later on in the presentation. And this helps us meet our sustainability goals, allows resiliency for the institution, as well as significant reduction in our electrical energy consumption. These two projects, as you'll see, you can see in the same view shed. So that's why we're here today. So what we're asking for approval of is the doors and the screen wall, because you can see them together. So with that, I'll hand it over to Henry Miller from Bayer Blinderbell.
Thank you, Brett. Thanks all. Pleasure to come here and talk about these projects with you tonight. My name is Henry Miller. I'm a principal at Bayer Blinderbell Architects, and we're the executive architect for this 83rd Street door restoration project. I'm going to go over some of the context, historical information, and context, and then hand it off to Nathan Rich from Peterson Rich office. They're the design architect for the doors. So quickly, just looking at the museum, I think we're aware it's a large complex of 21 wings from spanning from 84th Street to 80th Street on Fifth Avenue. It's in the park. So part of the reason we're here tonight is because all of the community boards on the park review anything that happens at the Met. It's a landmarked space. It was landmarked building. It was landmarked in 1967 by the New York City Landmarks Commission. And this plan shows the area in blue, which was extant at that time. And in green were the wings that were added later by Roche Tinkerlew. The museum also has an interior landmark, which is the Great Hall and the Grand Stair that was landmarked in 1974. So anything we do either at the exterior or in the landmarked interior, we need to go to landmarks for a public hearing. So both of these projects do have work at the exterior, and that's what we're going to look at today. And you can see here the two projects, as Brett mentioned, they're related in that they're on access with 83rd Street. And you can see the two here. The first one we're going to talk about is the 83rd Street entrance. Zooming in there, reinforcing some of the things Brett said about the reasons we're doing this project. You can see the aerial view at the top is the existing condition, which is really two public entrances and one controlled entrance at 83rd Street, was only seldom activated for public events in Grace Rainey Auditorium. The proposal is to provide three public entrances, and both the 83rd and the 81st Street being accessible, as well as bringing some amenities down to the plaza level at the interior. So this is a restoration project where we're restoring the doors that were originally there as part of the original McKimmey to White design. So this is a plaza level plan from 1906 showing with the three red arrows there indicating the three doors from the plaza, and an elevation view showing that same condition. Interesting to note here, I think, just as far as the symmetry of the building, you'll see when Michael talks about this, there's actually a pediment on access was 83rd Street beyond, and he'll talk a little bit about how we're addressing that. And there actually were no entrances originally at 81st Street, so that was a later addition. And we're not trying to maintain any specifics about symmetry across the center line of the museum. Here are some historic photos showing the 83rd Street entrances in action when they were still there. This is a page we're putting in just to note that, in fact, this restoration was proposed in 2001. It was never executed, but there is a strong precedent there of this having previously been approved by landmarks. Looking now a little bit at context, this is looking west at 83rd Street in the plaza. You can see that single door. Usually it's locked and closed. Zooming in, you can actually see the scar tissue in the sense of the infilled limestone here, where the original doors used to exist flanking the central entrance. So that's a little bit of a sign of where that infill was done. It's non-original. We'll be taking that out and actually restoring those entrances. Looking at some of the other public entrances for context, this is 81st Street. Obviously, the center door is at 82nd Street. If we zoom into that a little bit, I just want to point out the materiality here, which is the oxidized bronze and the relatively flat profiles of the soffit and the doors themselves and the transom panel. So looking at that in context on the full Fifth Avenue facade, you can see the existing condition above, and then the proposed condition below with the 3 entrances restored. And zooming in here, again, just the same view in a little bit more detail. Now we're showing that dashed in red area, which will be the screen wall, which Michael will talk about. But that kind of explains how they're related in that elevational view. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Nathan Rich from Peterson Rich office to talk a little bit about the specifics of design.
Thanks, Henry, and thanks for the opportunity to present the project. So I think Henry sets it up in terms of the sort of the history of the building, and our goal here with these doors is to make them feel as if, you know, they were always there. As Henry described, they were originally planned in the design. There was an approval to add them into the design in 2001. And so we're sort of restoring something that was originally intended and that has been planned at various phases of the museum. So this drawing shows the stone that's being removed to sort of restore those openings, the limestone, the primary limestone coursings, and then there is a Deer Isle granite base. So where we're removing the stone that had been infilled, we'll then be adding back in stone to create the new door frames. So if you go to the next slide, you can see our designed elevation with all 3 doors. Each of the doors matches one another, and they're all on center with the existing windows that are up at the Great Hall level of the museum, which you can see at the top of the drawing elevation. All 3 doors are double doors. The doors are going to be bronze, pre-aged bronze to match the existing doors on 82nd Street, which Henry showed a photo of. The top of the door purposefully aligns with the coursing of the limestone. The bottom rail of the door, where Henry's mouse is right now, purposefully aligns with the granite base of the building. And then at the top of the door, there's a transom where you see some placeholder text where there'll be signage above each of the doors, which will also be bronze. So if you go to the next slide, a little bit of detail of the door. So here on the elevation on the left, you can see the scale of the door and the way that the door is purposefully aligning with the limestone. This drawing also shows where we'll be sort of creating a new stone that's continuous with the original one to create this new frame of the door. And in the notes, you can see some information about the materiality. We're restoring the original limestone, we're restoring the original granite on the base, and then adding these new bronze doors with glass vision panels at the center. So there's a lot of visibility between the interior and exterior. You know, the goal of this project is to create a new accessible entrance into the museum. So it's going to change the way that people move through the museum, and in particular, the way that these doors will be the closest entry to the museum now to the 86th Street subway. So people that are coming off the 86th Street subway, rather than now going all the way up the grand staircase to the 82nd Street doors, will be able to enter here. So the vision panel is really important to see what's happening inside the museum. On the right is a section showing the way that the stone will now wrap the corner to create sort of a new jamb at the opening of the door. And then the bronze door will, there'll be a bronze frame around the bronze door that will contain some of the infrastructure that's required for the accessibility of the door. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that in detail. On the left is a plan detail of the door. So you're seeing kind of the right side, if you were on the exterior of the building, the right side of the door, the edge of the door, and then the bronze frame that comes out. a foot and a half past the door itself inside of that stone opening. That frame gives us a space to put a push button for ADA access, rather than putting that in the stone itself, which would sort of damage the original stone. That bronze frame gives us a space for that infrastructure. Likewise, on the right, there is a section with a detail of the top of the door. So there's the transom panel there with the kind of diagonal hatch in it where our signage will go. And above that is a header at the top of the door where we'll be recessing a light fixture. And that will be in that sort of bronze frame that wraps the whole door. If you go to the next slide. So here you can see in 3D that sort of bronze frame that I was referring to. The darker gray here represents the bronze door, and then the bronze frame around the door that's coming out for that ADA push button and for the light overhead. The glass here is represented with this kind of blue, but it will be a clear glass. And then I think this image also shows the way that the stone that we'll be adding back in to sort of create these new openings once we've removed the sort of the stone that had been infilled, then turns the corner to create sort of a stone opening and then the sort of bronze wrapping. Next slide. On the left is a drawing of the current existing door at 82nd Street, along with a photo of it. You can see the material of it. And what this image is meant to show on the right is the new door, or one of the new doors that'll be at 83rd Street, should this project move forward. And we wanted to make a drawing to show the material connection between the two. So again, the dark gray on the left on the 82nd Street door represents this pre-aged bronze, and we're adding the same material to these new doors shown on the right. Next slide. So a visualization to show the scale of it and to show the way that the doors are integrated into the facade, set back from the facade. There'll be a light fixture at the top of each of these doors on center that lights the opening itself and that also lights the signage. Again, this is just placeholder signage. The intention is that the two doors on the left will be ingress doors so that you'll enter through, and the door on the right primarily will be an egress door, but that'll vary depending on traffic and time of day. Next slide. And then when you look at the slight oblique angle, you can see the way that bronze frame represented here in the darker gray sort of comes out and forms a frame around the door opening. And then last slide, just a detail showing the placeholder signage on that bronze panel over the door will be lighter bronze lettering for the signage that is still in development, what it'll precisely say, but each of those the letters will be about 4 inches tall and will be lit from that light fixture over the door itself.
Thank you, Nathan. Good evening, committee members. I am Michael Whetstone. I'm also a principal at Bayard Bell, and I'm going to talk about the part 2 of this presentation, which is the Northside Chiller Plant Replacement Project. Next slide. This is a major, quite ambitious mechanical infrastructure being done for reasons of environmental resiliency and energy saving sustainability. So you can see where the project is, highlighted in pink. The project is actually located in 2 wings that were built in the 1950s and 1960s, and they are not on the facade. They are set more than 100 feet back from the facade and are behind the McKinley white wings. The next slide just shows where they are located in the section. Top is a section going from end to end of the museum, north to south, and you can see highlighted in pink where the project is, but I'll show you a blow-up section in the next slide just to show you what the major components are. So right now, the chiller plant, which serves about 60% of the building, is located in the very sub-basement, the yellow area of Wing W. And that is one of the lowest areas in the Met, but because of climate change and some recent catastrophic unprecedented rainfalls in Central Park, for example, during Hurricane Ida, this area now gets floodwaters, which it never did before, and that's critical infrastructure. It's also aging infrastructure. Some of the equipment there is 40 or 50 years old. So in our plan to replace it, we want to actually lift the chiller plant up 1 floor to the floor above, where you can see in blue there, and that is connected by enormous pipes to the new cooling towers on the roof. And that's the cooling towers on the roof, which are the subject of the landmarks hearing. But because we were moving the chiller plant up, we displaced some workshops for the museum does its exhibit preparation. They build exhibit cases and pedestals, etc. That's going to now move to the 3rd floor, and we're actually going to infill a little bit. You can see highlighted there, we're going to infill some little light wells with some new floor area, about 4,000 square feet, not visible from the street, but some new floor area in order to provide that workshop space. So those are the major pieces. Let's take a look at it from the outside. Next slide, please. Oh, one more slide. This shows in blue. Sorry, Henry, back one. This shows in blue the area served by the north side chiller plant. It serves 60% of the building. The building is 2.1 million square feet, so this serves 1.25 million square feet. And the chiller plant makes chilled water, which is pumped in pipes to the various HVAC systems that exist in all the wings highlighted in blue. And they're, of course, critical for maintaining the museum's constant 70-degree, 50% humidity, year-round temperature requirements, which are important for art conservation. So really everything about this project is a technical consideration in the support of the art conservation requirements. Next slide. And this project will actually, because the equipment is new and state-of-the-art, this north side chiller plant will use 54% less electricity than it does now. So there's a major cost savings. This is the energy model produced by our mechanical engineers. Next slide. So here we are looking at the front of the building and the roof. So you can see that there are 2 major sets of cooling towers on the roof of the Met. On the left are existing cooling towers. They were most recently put in 2012 with a screen wall in front of them. And on the right in red are the old aging cooling towers that we are planning to remove and replace. And the next slide shows the proposed configuration. So you can see that in the elevation and the aerial view that we're proposing to build an aluminum louvered screen wall, very similar to the existing aluminum louvered screen wall on the south side on the left. That was approved by Landmarks, finished in 2012 for our new cooling towers. And it's not completely symmetrical because the roof line is a little bit different, as you can see, and our screen wall is actually a little bit lower than the one on the left. Next slide. And this is just a view of that north side of the building. So the cooling towers in red, most of which are on top of the Grace Rainey Rogers Auditorium, are being removed. These are the aging, inefficient cooling towers. As you can see, they actually also are installed on 2 different levels. The ones on the right are lower, and that's very problematic engineering-wise. And so our new configuration, which you'll see in the next slide, is to put all the cooling towers on the roof of the auditorium and then to build that screen wall. Now, as you can see, the cooling towers and the screen wall are set back, as I said, about 106 feet from the street. So they are not visible at all from Fifth Avenue or from the plaza. They're really set far into the building. But you can see on the left, we have the corridor of 83rd Street. So at a certain point, maybe about 50 feet to 200 feet down 83rd Street, you get some partial visibility of the very top of the screen wall, which I'll show you in detail. But that's really the visibility issues that we were talking about, is the top of the screen wall is seen from down the side street. Next slide. Just quickly some existing conditions. Here's a photograph of the current cooling towers on the roof of the auditorium, and you can see that McKimmon and white gabled roof on the right. Next slide. And here is just some details of that very distinctive McKimmon and white pediment, which you see rising above the 83rd Street entrance. Next slide. So here's a roof plan. You can see our cooling towers and screen wall set symmetrically behind the pedimented roof. And then in orange, the 2 little bits of orange on the left are the 2 infill roofs that we're proposing to infill the courtyards to make more space for the workshops. Next slide is just a more detailed view. On the left are just photographs of those 2 light wells, not at all visible from the street and not located in any historic architecture, but we're going to slab over some of those to make that extra space. I'll just talk about a cross-section. So on the top is a cross-section showing in orange the plate girders that will span over the roof of the auditorium, and in blue the cooling towers on top. And then below is a section cut the other way. There's the Fifth Avenue Plaza on the right, and then the cooling towers on top of the auditorium on the left. And since I'm going to be talking about the height of this assembly, there's a detail section showing the assembly. Everything about this vertical section of piping and cooling towers, and in orange, the beams, the plate girders spanning the auditorium. Everything there is really determined by engineering requirements, and we're work very hard, of course, to keep it as low as possible. So we have clearance above the existing roof. We have pipes at a minimum height above the roof, which are used for draining and balancing. The orange is the plate girder spanning across, and then the cooling towers and platform on top. Next slide. And here's a axonometric. So the louvered screen wall that you see, which is matching the one on the south side, is entirely attached to the steel framing of the new framing for the cooling towers, and it actually floats about 1 foot above the McKimmon white masonry. So there's no attachment to the historic masonry. It's all attached to the new structure behind. Next slide. And then here's a detail. Photos on the left are of the south side screen wall that was installed about 14 years ago. And we're going to match that same aluminum louver detail, which you can see in the elevation below. Next slide, please. Here's just some details of the historic masonry versus the new cooling tower dunnage. Next slide. So the next thing to talk about is visibility. So both the south side cooling towers and the north side cooling towers, which you can see in this aerial photograph, both coincidentally happen to align with 81st Street and 83rd Street. So those yellow areas kind of represent the view corridor that you get from both those side streets towards this mechanical equipment, which is really located in the middle of the building, but is visible from both those side streets. So just taking a quick look. First, let's look at the south side. There's some sightline drawings that we often do, the cooling towers and screen wall shown at the top left. And of course, I said you cannot see these things at all from close up to the building, but when you go down the side street, the photo on the right, you can. So on the next slide, just a blow up of that same photograph. You can see on the right, above the sloped glass roof there of the museum, you can see rising the dark line is the existing screen wall that was put in 2012. And it's a very limited amount of visibility, and you really only see it when you're somewhat far down the street. And then it's similar to what we're proposing on 83rd Street on the north side. So here's a section, same kind of section, showing our cooling towers on top and the sightline views, and then some views going down. So I did a series of views. Go to the next slide. Each view you can see on the left, view 1, view 2, view 3, view 4, just backed up about 40 feet for each one. So top photograph, you can't see it at all. At view 2, which is about 50 feet down the street, I highlight it in a red line because it's hard to see. You start to see the very top of that screen wall peeking above the horizontal roof. The next slide, you can see it a little bit more, but you're far down the street and it's kind of obscured by the branches. And then by the time you get to the next slides, Madison Avenue and Park Avenue, you're just too far away and you can't really see it at all. So what we're talking about is visibility of just the top of that screen wall for that section of 83rd Street, similar to what exists at 81st Street. And then Landmark's staff required us to build a scaffolding mock-up to prove out what I showed you in those renderings. And so we built this scaffold during the summer and took some photographs, the next slides, which basically show the same slight visibility above the roof. And we also, just to make sure, we took a look at the visibility of those cooling towers from the north. If you go all the way to the edge of the reservoir, where you can get a long view of the Met, I think that there's so many trees in the way, and there's so many other aspects of the Met building that are all lined up there that I think the visibility is minimal, if anything, from the north side. So that's the visibility issue. So you might have wondered, why did we put the cooling towers exactly where they are, and why are they exactly as tall as they are? So I just wanted to explain some of the engineering considerations for that. So on the top left, you can see the cooling towers actually rotated 90 degrees and lined up behind the McKimmon white pedimented roof. That's what we wanted to do first. But for structural reasons, we could not do that. We had to move them to where we're proposing them. In the bottom left, you can see the original auditorium, McKimmon white, semicircular, massive 2-foot thick bearing walls. That was modified in 1953 to build the current auditorium, which you can see that floor plan of. And so on the top right, you can see a diagram. They removed some of the bearing wall. It's the red dotted line. They kept the bearing wall on the left and right. And then in blue, you can see the steel framed modern extension. So our engineers figured out that you cannot possibly put the cooling towers on top of that steel framing that was added in the 1950s, which is farther west, would not hold it up. And so we needed to put the cooling towers on top of the bearing walls, which is what we're doing, the red bearing walls. That's what the current cooling towers are doing. And so we're using the same configuration. So that's our structural explanation. And then the other question you might have noticed is that the existing cooling towers on the left that we're going to remove in red. Those are much shorter than the existing ones, and those are kind of a horizontal low boy kind of a cooling tower. And when we replace these, we actually cannot put those kinds of cooling towers in anymore. It's called a forced draft cooling tower. It's much lower, but it uses twice the electricity as the current kind. And like the New York City Energy Code doesn't even allow you to use cooling towers like that anymore because the taller ones, called induced draft, are so much more efficient. So the cooling towers have to be higher for the reasons of energy conservation and the current code practice. And here's just some detail on that cooling tower unit. So next section, I'll just leave, this is the end of it. I'm just going to show you some historic precedents. There has always been major mechanical infrastructure in this particular location of the Met. And it's been variously visible to various degrees over the decades. So you can see in this photograph on the top left, it's around 1912. It actually shows those three doors that Henry and Nathan described. But you can see peeking up behind that is a smokestack. And there was actually a McKimbey and White designed 1911 coal-fired boiler house in that same section of the museum, which had an enormous smokestack that you can see in the photograph on the bottom as well. And there's a McKimbey and White section of it. So some visibility of mechanical infrastructure, I think, has to be expected for a building of this size. The next slide shows what came next. In the 1960s, the current Wing W also had cooling towers. You can see circled in red on the top left. Those cooling towers were just right next to the McKimbey and White pedimented roof. And then those were replaced in the 1980s by two enormous cooling towers, which had a huge screen wall, which were even more visible, taller than the ones that we are proposing. And this is actually the last slide, but just wanted to show everybody precedents for, slightly visible mechanical infrastructure set far beyond the facade as something that's part of the history of the Met. So thank you for listening to that long presentation. That's the end, and we welcome your questions and comments.
Excellent. Thank you. Do you guys want to do questions first? Or Jessie, do we have anyone from the public who wants to give comment?
I don't see anyone's hand up.
Okay, fantastic.
Just one quick, well, actually two. The screen wall you said was aluminum?
That's right. It's an aluminum louver that matches
And
the
what-
color. Sorry.
What color?
It's going to be light gray. It's going to match exactly the color of this existing screen wall on the south side. It's kind of a light gray painted aluminum louver.
My second question is, do I assume that the other four community boards approved the project?
Yes, except for one community board didn't have a quorum. So, and now I'm blanking on which one it was, guys. It was not
10.
11, 10. 10 didn't have a quorum, but the others did.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I reviewed all of this 68 pages online, and I have, I'm favorably disposed, although I'll hear what anybody else has to say. I had two questions. Jay asked one of them, so that leaves me with one. And that is, if you could look at page 27 again, where you were comparing the doors of the existing 82nd Street entrance to the proposed doors restored doors at 83rd Street. It appeared to me, it was really hard to see, but it appeared that the handles on the rendering for the new doors at new restored doors at 83rd Street look different from the handles on the set of doors at 82nd Street. Are they different? These are rectangular, solid rectangles. It looks as if there's a little bit more ornamentation or shaping to the 82nd Street door handles. Is it intended to be different?
It is. They're going to be a little bit larger, partly because there'll be a wider range of people that are going to be opening these doors. So part of it's for accessibility reasons, and then part of it's just that the design itself is in development.
Well, I mean, it's a rendering over there. I think something slightly softer and with slight suggestion of historicism might be better than what you're rendering on page 27 for the those handles. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Well, to be accurate, I used to work in the Metropolitan Museum a long time ago. And I remember all of the quirky ways you can avoid the public and walk through wonderful cavernous corridors. Obviously, it's now many, many years later and they need all the space and whatever they can get. But what troubles me about this is that, is this being driven because of the museum's wish to keep more artifacts on view, or for special events? Because the Met has grown so much. I mean, you can't walk through it in a day anymore. There's so much richness there. So I don't understand why this big change with the darker windows and doors. You know, the Met is friendly right now, and people know it. And I'm just, you know, maybe, you know, I'm just a dinosaur and I'm looking at something that I feel is too big for its vessel. So I wish I could, I'm telling you this only because I don't know enough to be able to approve this. I have too many questions and I don't want to take the time of this committee. So I'm just going to withdraw and say that I wish you luck. I hope it's not going to be as big and different with the different colored doors and things like that. And maybe pare it back and try to work within the architecture that has been there, and hopefully this is the end. Thank you.
Madge, do you have a question?
I have a comment. To me, it's the opposite. It seems friendlier. It's allowing more people in without long lines. And the doors don't look that different to me. And the doors on the south side, I mean, they're a few blocks away, so you don't have to match them exactly, but it looks pretty much the same in your rendering and the photographs. And I would very much be in favor of this. It looks pretty good to me.
Does anyone else have questions for the applicant? Okay, no more questions.
Are we voting separately on this and the chiller?
That's it. I was going to see, but no one has any more questions for the applicants.
No, I don't.
No,
Very
okay.
thorough.
Okay, great. So in our discussion as the committee, that can be the first thing. Is there anyone who would like to vote on the two things separately?
No.
No. It sounds like, other than, well, I haven't heard from Miriam or Kay.
Yeah, I think they've clearly studied the issues in a lot of detail, which I appreciate. So I feel good about that. And it seems like they're trying to match what's existing. So again, I think there's been a lot of study and sort of in the real world, we've seen it. So yeah, I want to approve it. I think it seems like a good plan. I know there's a lot of issues accessing the Met nowadays. There's not enough doors, especially on the weekends. So anything that makes it more accessible, both to people in wheelchairs, but also just people trying to get through, I think is a very good thing to do.
Yeah, I thought the presentation was very thorough and I appreciate all of that. I like this entrance. Sometimes I feel like I'm, now that's something to get into, like, so, you know, positive. That'd be great.
Two things. One is I'm glad to see this because so many times I'm a little bit nervous on steps these days, and so many people sit on the central steps and they place themselves next to the railings, so you can't even hold onto the railings if you want to. So I think this is a great development. The second thing is I would propose a resolution that we approve the proposal both together as presented.
Second.
Do you have something drafted or?
I mean,
If not, well, we can do what we
I was
always
just taking
do
some quick
and take a
notes,
vote.
but I
Yeah.
can send it, we'll send it around. I've just been
Fantastic.
taking notes. so we can-
All in favor? Okay, so it's 3-6 opposed.
Michelle, are you voting? Oh, Michelle.
Oh, Michelle, sorry.
Michelle, her hand is up.
Yes, I'm
Michelle,
voting yes.
Yes, sorry, I should have come to you for questions. I apologize. I'm new.
No
Okay.
problem. And I, thank you.
So 7 in favor, no against, no
And I
excused,
was
1.
never here.
Okay, excellent.
7-0-1-0.
Yeah,
Any non-committee members?
We don't have.
Yeah, okay.
It's here.
okay, thank you so much.
You.
All
Have
right,
a great
thanks.
rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Um, do you guys,
Are you here for 322?
We are.
excellent. Do you want Jessie to share the presentation? Would that be helpful?
Just a friend.
You're not the presenter. so-
You're not the presenter.
Who are the presenter?
Who's Jessie?
I'm sorry.
The presenter should be on, let's see,
Oh, they're on Zoom.
They're on
Oh,
mine, they're on
okay.
mine.
Thank you.
Elliot.
Yes.
Can everyone see?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. It is always incredibly difficult following the Met. For some reason, I always follow them when I go in front of community board hearing. So with that, I will do my absolute best. Let me share my screen.
That's okay. To talk about it.
Okay.
I can promise you this is going to be a lot shorter. As there's significantly less to go through. So with that, I'll jump right into it.
Who are you?
Oh, I'm Elliot Folsom from Panorama Windows.
And can I actually, can I interrupt, Elliot? Sorry, this is Sandy from the board. We met previously. So I'm Sandy Ashendorf. This is Marie Murphy, whose apartment it is that we're talking about, and Caitlin Marcoux, also on the board. And, sorry.
Another community board member.
Thank you for doing and so Elliot has been hired by Marie and her husband Gil. But we have, our interests are aligned in this, so as you saw from the.
We've seen your
supporting
letters.
letters. Yeah, so just to give some context, thank you.
We'll jump right in. So we're talking about 322. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
We're talking about 322 West 72nd Street. The building was built in between 1924 and 1925 by George and Edward Bloom. It consists primarily of a colonial revival and Art Deco style that is primarily made of red brick, with the exception of the podium, which is I think limestone, and then on the top 2 floors, there's some decorative limestone work. And we are talking about the replacement of 7 windows on the 3rd floor. Let me see. So to start off, I have the tax photos. Here you can see I have the tax photos of the building, which unfortunately you can't really tell. So I also included tax photos from 330 West 72nd Street, and this is a zoomed in photo where on the left-hand side, you can see the original configuration consists of both 8/1 and 6/1 double hung windows. This is a photo of the building as it currently stands. In the late 90s, and this is my guess, in the late 90s, early 2000s, the building replaced all of its windows. And the majority of them are 1/1 double hung windows. So I went through, there are 156 window openings above the podium. 125 of them are 1/1 double hung windows, and the rest 31 are single light casements or tilt turn windows. The 7 windows in question are the ones highlighted in red here on the bottom, and 3 of the 7 windows have a bottom transom that were added after the fact for, I'm assuming, an air conditioning unit. And currently they have a piece of 1/4-inch plexiglass installed. So here are some closer photos. You can see, this is probably better. You can see the plexiglass at the bottom and the even sash above, which do not match any of the windows adjacent to it or throughout the entire facade of the building. And so we find that condition in window 1, window 5, and you can't really tell here, but also window 7. So this is just an elevation drawing that we did of the existing window, where you see the shortened double hung window above the transom, which is housing an existing piece of plexiglass. And this is the proposed 1/1 double hung window that we're going with. Now, I know that this differs from the historic, which was a combination of 6/1 and 8/1 double hung windows. But by changing and going back with a 1/1 double hung window, we're keeping the aesthetic of the building as it currently stands consistent. And we're also giving the opportunity to our clients to have a more thermally efficient and comfortable living environment, because the plexiglass transom that used to house air conditioning units is not efficient, and in the extreme heat, it's letting heat in, and the extreme cold is letting cold in. So really, it's a combination of maintaining uniformity and also giving the clients just the comfort that they should have for their home. And then the rest of my presentation just contains our drawing package. So you can see the existing windows are up on top, with our proposed elevation below. And as we go down, you can see this is on the left-hand side, this is the existing aluminum double hung replacement window detail. That this is pretty much throughout the entire building, with the exception of those 31 windows that are either single light casements or tilt turn windows. And this is our proposed aluminum window that would match in configuration and color, so it would not look different from the windows that are currently installed. And this last detail is the vertical section of the 3 windows that have the fixed bottom transom with plexiglass, just to give you guys an idea of what that looks like. And then finally, it's the plan view detail to show the windows and their sight lines and how they would not change the aesthetic of the building. And that does it for me.
Yes.
Hi, first, does anybody on the committee want to speak or have questions? Klari? I don't have questions, but I want to speak. Okay, so in May of 2022, we had an application that was similar, although not, well, it was identical in the sense that it was seeking 1/1 double hung windows. It was a similar background from my own building, an extensive discussion with the applicant. I didn't vote on that. I wasn't conflicted, but I chose not to vote. But the committee voted unanimously, those who voted in favor of recommending to the LPC that the 1/1s be approved. This is a stronger case for that tonight, because every single window, there's no window in this building that is the original configuration. I do have a question for either Panorama or probably the Sandy. Is there, I mean, these were all done at once in, 25 years ago or something. Is there a formal master plan? Because that helps it.
Not that I'm aware of.
Because if there were a formal master plan for 1/1, you probably wouldn't be here.
Well, I think.
But, okay, anyway.
Well, let me,
yeah.
sort of try to address that. So at the time that we did it, and it was fewer than 25, it was, I don't know what.
Whatever.
I think, yeah, in the teens, I think. Yeah, a teen number of years ago. I think there was not a master plan, probably for two reasons. One, because we were not yet in the landmark district.
Right.
So we probably didn't need to have one. And the other reason is we were just replacing the windows. And I think it was like, yeah, they're all looking the same, so you just do the windows. You don't need a plan to do them.
Well, I don't know whether at this, I mean, I'm in favor of this, as you can tell. I'm not sure whether at this point that you could have a master plan that would make it go more smoothly. But the argument here is that there is not a single window in this building that is in the original configuration, and presumably nobody would want to have one. In my view, in the case of my own building, where, and I have both our resolution from 2022 and LPC's denial of that application, and they required 3/1, of which there were a few, and mostly not original, but replacements, but you don't have any of those. And so I think, in my view, that LPC is completely out to lunch on this issue in requiring, particularly when you've had a uniform building-wide replacement in the understandable absence of a master plan because of how it took place. I think LPC is out to lunch. They may deny it anyway, but in summary, I would propose and believe that we should approve your application on the applicant's application, supported by the co-op, on the grounds that there's not a single window in this building that is in that original configuration, and it would be a glaring appearance to require it.
Thank you. If I can add something to that, if that's appropriate.
Yeah.
Speak to Clari's comment. In fact, the only set of windows that are not uniform with the rest of the building are
Right.
3Bs. And the reason is, as I'm sure we all experience as residents of, unit buildings, sometimes people just do things in the four walls of their apartment without getting any kind of, whether it's landlord or shareholder approval. And I think that's what happened here with their
Prior owner.
their sellers, or prior owners. I think I remember the woman, she lived there for just a pretty short time, but it happened to be around the time of the replacement project.
Yeah.
And I think she just did her own thing. I don't know how she did it, but that sometimes happens.
I mean, Arc of Night.
What's that? Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if the
Yeah.
contractor did it for, I have no idea.
If I could just add one more thought to what I said, and I don't mean to dominate the discussion while I'm doing so. But if LPC is requiring 3/1,
Six.
or 6/1 in your case, 3/1 in
Yeah.
our building next door, is a really disincentive for people who have not windows that are not energy efficient. It's a real disincentive to replace them because they currently have 1/1, or a few of them in your building have a single pane. And it's like, do I really want to go to the trouble of replacing my windows for more efficient when I'm going to have to go 3/1? So
Six,
I just-
or
I'm
number
sorry,
six, and
six,
the
six over.
facade, you're looking at the river,
Yeah.
it's have all these
Yeah,
mullions.
I mean, I just think LPC's out to lunch on this.
Thank you.
A couple of observations. First of all, full disclosure, I recently replaced 7 windows in my apartment facing West End Avenue with panorama. And I was very pleased with them, other than contributing an exorbitant amount of money to their bottom line, because my building has a master plan and it's 6/6. I could buy a small car. for the price of those windows. Anyway,
True
Just-
divided lights or false mountains?
true
True
divided.
divided lights.
True divided.
They're simulated divided lights.
They're simulated, well, they're
Yes.
both sides.
Yeah, in your building in particular, it's a 3-part. You have a grid on the outside and between the glass and on the inside.
Right.
So I should have gotten a discount.
Sure.
Anyway, just a quick observation we've seen over the years, lots of applications where windows have been partially replaced. And what landmarks that gave us guidance by the way they've ruled, they usually take into account 2 factors. One of which is whether the windows themselves constitute a major item, a decorative item in the building themselves. And in this building, frankly, if there were numerous 6-over ones, it probably would be. This is a very simple facade. And secondly, what the case is here is to how much of the original, how many of the original windows remain. So I agree with Klari that since there are none, it would have the opposite effect to require the historical window would just be the beginning of a hodgepodge of windows, which we generally don't favor. So
Right.
I'm in favor of it too.
No, I think you're on the right path.
Miriam?
Why bring apart? Three,
Yeah, thank Klari and Jay.
congratulations.
Well,
yeah.
we're voting yet.
No, but it's there.
I don't, well, we agree with what Panorama presented and we like the conformity of it. And yeah, and like Sandy was saying, where our building's located, if you look out over Riverside Park, so you have great views. It's nice to be able to see it unobstructed.
And after we vote on this, Adam was gonna talk a little bit more about,
Yeah, we
This is
can,
the way shop.
I
So-
want to just,
Well, that's cool.
I just want to make one comment. In your application and the presentation you just gave, on the first slide, you have the wrong building identified in your little map. So probably change that before you go before the full commission. I think you call out 330, not
that's my building.
322.
It's
On the first slide, on the first slide.
I think he was
First
comparing to, wasn't he?
He had both.
No, on this slide, that building is not 322, the one you highlighted. That's 330.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah, so just fix that before.
Yeah, good catch, thanks.
If I could just expand on what I said, you know, we've heard recently similar situations, as even aside from the one in my own building, and third-hand understanding is that if there were a master plan, LPC might not even require a hearing, or in any event would be much more amenable to honoring the master plan. In terms of you're getting this approved, I have no idea whether it's still possible for you to, if the board is inclined to do so, a quick master plan and with or without Panorama involved that might facilitate what you're all after here.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know which makes more sense. I mean, in what we're dealing with right now is only one apartment that has sort of substandard windows because they were not part, right, aesthetically, they're different too. But they're not efficient, they're, you know, the whole plexiglass thing, all of that. It's not like we have any intention or anyone else in the building has proposed needing new windows.
Well, the plexiglass thing is complicated because they're worse than anything else you've got there. But, LPC absolutely just plain denied the application in our building for 1/1s. Although, as I say, there were some 3/1, some of which were replacements.
Right.
Required by the LPC since designation, and I think a few originals. So your chances, you have a stronger case than the applicant in our building, but you might get creamed by the LPC. And you might find yourselves in a much better position if you have a master.
I would say some of the commissioners who are real sticklers are no longer on it though, so you might have a better.
Yeah.
My building, by the way, does have.
Does the master plan mean, maybe I'm not understanding what it is actually, because as I said, this just came out like they want to change the window, so, okay. Is the master plan something that LPC has to approve?
Yes.
Or do?
They have to approve it. Once they approve it, you don't have to go through
Right.
this
so,
process
okay.
or a public hearing.
But they have to approve it, so.
Yeah,
so would
your
it
the replacement company will
Jay,
just file it.
Do you think that LPC would approve a master plan of 1/1 here?
I don't know.
I think if you get this
Would make
approved,
more sense.
if you get this approved,
Yeah.
then you can go
yes.
back and you can get the master
That's
plan, and then you
what
can
I'm
get
thinking.
then you can get a staff approval for anything. So
Yeah,
my
that's what I'm
suggestion
thinking.
is
Yeah,
that
thank you
great
for
idea.
that.
we as a committee
Thank you.
vote.
Great idea.
Enthusiastically.
And they're pretty forthcoming.
Yeah.
You know, if you wanted to go in and present, informally to staff. Explain the situation, they'll give you usually a pretty good guide as to what might happen.
Thank you, all right, so.
So that is correct. There has been turnover at LPC since they rolled against the.
Oh, no,
Yeah, my
that was,
building.
oh, your building.
In the building next door, and you do have a stronger case, so you might not, you might get what you're asking for.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
definitely want to try.
Not because we, but because.
I want to ask one
I
thing.
think you have, cloud, and this is why.
With the.
Jay, I wanted to ask one thing.
Sure.
Totally agree with you on the two things they care about, existing historic windows and level of ornamentation.
Right,
In our resolution, we could say that the top of the building is relatively more ornamental.
Yeah.
And so therefore, we think 1/1 is appropriate. Are you comfortable with that, or is that stupid?
sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll just.
We'll just talk about harmoniousness.
Harmonious.
Yeah, I-
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Aesthetically consistent, I mean, it's all,
And
Some people might
But-
not
yeah.
consider that.
before we vote, Michele, do you have anything you would like to add or ask?
I just want to know if that plexiglass covered up an area that was formerly occupied by an air conditioner, how is this apartment air conditioned?
I,
Other 1/1 window in that room, and I just put in a regular air conditioner, so I can't
Window-
use that.
A window air conditioner?
Yes.
In the front of the building.
Yeah.
You're not gonna punch-
There's a mix of punch. and-
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would propose
Thank
to approve as
Perfect.
presented.
Okay.
Here.
That's great, that's just, but I. Young lady sitting over there, is she a new board member?
Yeah, she's our-
Yeah, I was wondering. What's your, he's confused, Sophia.
You're welcome to sit here.
Yeah. And to.
Well, that's why I was asking for that. I mean,
Yeah.
you're allowed to vote as a non-committee board member this time.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if you were gonna vote.
I didn't even see.
Yeah. I can record your vote in a separate area. Yeah.
If you're shopping, maybe we'll give you a discount.
Yeah.
And I'll-
this panorama.
wait,
All right.
Okay, let's vote. Anybody pose?
yes, I propose that we approve it as presented.
Second? Yes.
Yep.
Yep,
Unanimous.
and Michelle?
Michelle is voting yes.
Okay,
So you're voting yes?
the way we do it is.
Yeah, they're in.
And now we,
Committee members, we take the vote,
So
and
we're
then we
8-0.
take non-committee board members. So on that, we have 1-0-0-0.
You approve? All right.
Okay, so we're 8-0-0 and 1-0-0.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you for your presentation. You guys are welcome to stay for new business.
Yeah.
All right, either of these. okay.
Thank you.
Do you have his calendar at LPC?
I don't think, I'm pretty sure neither of them are calendared.
no, this is, sorry, this is calendared on December 17th.
Yeah, so we're okay. Okay, excellent.
All right.
All right.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
New business. There are a couple things I wanted to suggest that we do. The first is the email that we send to applicants with what CB7 asks for is fairly out of date. So I'm going to send that around to folks, and if folks have comments or things that they want change, suggestions, please email me. And then what I'll try to do is for our December meeting, I will take what you guys have sent, some things of my own, and send it around. And hopefully at that meeting, we can discuss what we're sending to applicants and hopefully update that. There's all sorts of stuff that no longer comes up, paper, things like that. Yes.
I actually raised this a long time ago, and I haven't looked at the stuff we sent them, but with this hybrid meeting stuff, we had agreed at the time that while we can't, I did some inquiries about it, and the decision was we can't require people to appear. But we agreed to put in that material that the committee prefer the applicants to appear in person. And often there are reasons for that.
Yeah.
If they do it hybrid, we can't see materials. Yeah, things
So-
like that. So I would just ask that
Yeah.
if it's there, that it be kept there. And if it's not, that we indicate that we have a preference.
Yeah, I would flag that. I think both presentations we saw tonight, I think virtual or in person, either would have been fine. But I take your
agree.
point on, maybe we can say like, if you're bringing materials, that sort of thing, we prefer you to come in person. But I think in general, most of the ones we see, part of our job, I think, is to make sure we are representing the community, without making people's lives, again, I think it's kind of funny that the net has to go to every single community.
Well, that's an
board.
unusual
Yeah,
situation,
but
but.
I take it and we can try to figure out something that's appropriate. So I'll send that around. Yeah.
I'm confused. So we're not requiring people to come to?
We can't.
Yeah.
We can't require them to appear here in person since the law allows them to appear remotely.
Including applicants, not just members.
Yeah.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
but we get their, whatever, they can choose to be here or not be here.
Yes.
But we get the copy of whatever it is they're proposing, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That doesn't change.
that doesn't
No,
change.
that
What
doesn't, that
what I'm
hasn't.
suggesting is that we send to applicants, this is what CB7 wants in your presentation.
Right.
I think that can be updated based on, I think there's still stuff in there for stuff that's now a staff level staff level review, so it would never come to us.
Right.
There are things that we
Right.
haven't expressed interest in that.
That's a
applicants-
good idea.
So that's one. Two is based off of the conversation tonight. I think a lot of what this committee does is an application comes before us and we look at it. We can do more. So if we think that LPC is running amok with these window things, we can send something to LPC. We can establish like internally, like, this is what we do. Like we could send a letter to LPC saying, we think that staff level approval should be offered to the type of project that we saw tonight. That is absolutely something we could do. Again, who knows if it would go anywhere, but I guarantee you we would be the first community board to send LPC a letter not tied to a specific applicant in probably 20 years.
Just a little bit of history. Several years ago, LPC made some major changes in their rules. And the proposals diminished the input of community boards. The initial proposals diminished the input of community boards pretty substantially. Actually, Mark Diller and I was co-chairing the committee at that time. And they invited community boards to comment stuff, and basically citywide, there were like 4 boards that really took an active role, the ones that you can imagine, us, Greenwich Village, Brooklyn Heights, and I forget what the 4th.
Upper East Side.
But, no, interesting enough, not the Upper East Side, but mostly the 4 premier
Yeah.
brownstone
Yeah.
communities took a very active role. We attended several meetings, did memoranda, and we really were able to preserve a lot of the review capacity, particularly with rear yard additions and rooftop additions. So I would be very cautious about going in the other direction and suggesting that we want staff to do. That's my observation.
Yeah, because what.
And it's based on that history. I mean, city agencies are loath to give away their jurisdiction in any way. And the more they can absorb themselves, the happier they tend to be. So we need to be cautious.
Yeah,
about that.
I guess I would be cognizant of the fact that there is certainly, I think we've all heard some pushback in the full board of folks who think that we're reviewing a lot of things so again, I'm not saying, one way or the other, but I think there is agree that it was not, stupid, inappropriate.
And let's discuss that more when we are
I
off
want
the
to discuss
record.
that.
Well, we cannot actually discuss this off the record. That would be unfortunately illegal.
I don't have any
Yes.
problem discussing
Yeah.
it on the record.
But I think the point I was trying to say is, let's give some thought to, if the answer is like, no, we want to continue to see everything we see, fine. If the answer is, well, we want to continue to be able to see them, but maybe we should have some like guidelines for like what we think works or doesn't
We
work.
can edit ourselves a bit too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
And, you know, picking,
That's the point I was gonna make, the complaint that we shouldn't be showing visuals is, in my opinion, totally inappropriate.
Well, especially because we had visuals, we just weren't able to show them.
Right,
Yeah.
and I've been on this committee since I was appointed to the board,
since you were a boy.
since I was.
No, at the time he was not a boy.
Well, I was 15
We'll hear
years
that.
younger than I am now, and I chaired the committee for 7 years. And when I first got on the committee, we didn't do visuals.
At full board.
At full
We didn't
board,
have the technology.
yeah.
Yeah.
And frankly, you know, there was really a demand
There's certainly.
by full board members for visuals, and sometimes we'd invite people to come in with boards and, you know, diagrams. So I agree with what Louisa said at the meeting, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I agree with Madge that maybe we had, and by we, I mean you, have to edit more carefully what goes into the presentation and keep it as lean as possible, which generally, I think, you know, one before photo and one rendering if it possibly shows the project well, or two, and that's it. You know, the specifications and the cross sections and multiple elevations are fine for us, but are unnecessary and a turnoff in full board. So that's that.
Can I just add something there? The issue with not displaying any of the images had nothing to do with our decision from the board office. It had everything to do with the tech situation over there. That unfortunately, not even their Wi-Fi was functioning for us to even project it. So even attempting to do that would have probably thrown off the whole meeting. And it's a risk that we had to take. So I just want to make sure that you guys are aware that it wasn't like personal to the committee. We're unfortunately dealing with tech situation that we weren't expecting.
And I would vote to do away with hybrid meetings, and I've made clear for a long time.
Yeah.
There are times where the complexity and the stacking of, like brownstone, you get the stoop, special windows, and there it goes, to oblivion in terms of what should be done or not. Many times, people don't have the resources to go through and do everything. We had this a long time ago. I remember a long discussion that we had about trying to push people to do more work than they could afford or what they thought was real. So again, I just caution, we can only respond to what the applicant is bringing us in terms of what they want to do. And we can also always say, if you get stuck, let somebody on our committee or bring it to the committee to be able to fulfill whatever it is they need. We want to help them be.
Hey, that's fine at the committee level.
That's all I'm talking about.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what we present in full board.
I think Dave was responding to what I brought up.
That's right.
Yeah, that's fine.
There's
Okay.
nothing else
And
to
then,
be said from me.
Sorry, and then I have one more thing I want to just
Go
discuss.
ahead.
A couple things, although reason this is being, I'm under a lot of pressure from my husband to die. With regard to what Jay was saying in response to Adam, notwithstanding the terrific efforts of Jay and Mark and whoever else at the time to limit the way that we were losing our review hours on LPC things. Nevertheless, the result of all of what happened is there's a whole set of rules that now more clearly specifically defines what can be reviewed at staff level, and it's a lot more than it used to be. And I am certainly, I think with Jay, not in favor of taking the position that we should be looking at less. That having been said, on this particular issue of the window replacement, where it may be, I think it would be interesting to see, and in about a month, we'll know what happens with 322/72. And if between the change in commissioners and whatever, and the stronger application that the next door to our building, if they approve, then, you know, maybe we leave it alone because things have gotten sort of more sensible there. If not, I think we might consider a kind of a specific letter on that point,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's gonna make any difference, but you know, it makes us feel better.
If we don't think it's gonna make any difference, then we shouldn't have any of these meetings.
You know,
So-
sometimes, you know, one of the things we accomplished with LPC is because of the calendaring situation, the fact that we meet once a month and they meet once a week, we often had situations where because of the dates, we didn't have an opportunity to make a decision before it appeared. Now, or sometimes especially on routine things, the board was comfortable and LPC was comfortable with accepting the committee resolution in lieu of a full board.
Although we've
resolution.
specifically told LPC.
Yes,
Yeah, our applications before us take longer than they do before other boards.
Okay.
Yeah, to give us the chance and to give full board a
Oh,
chance.
takes longer in the
Yes,
calendar.
there are other CBs that are not given that opportunity by LPC, so we are
Yes.
very lucky to have
Well,
that.
so what I was gonna say is that we were successful in negotiating an agreement with LPC that on significant issues, substantial issues, if we weren't gonna get a chance to weigh in as a full board, we would request an adjournment and they would give it, and they did. And on routine issues, we wouldn't ask.
Yeah.
We would just do, and over the years, I mean, I haven't had occasion to participate in it, but they respected that.
Yeah.
We did it with Bard just recently, they postponed for us.
Okay, so they've honored.
Yeah.
Through
Yeah.
3 different commissions.
Yeah, I mean, on the other point about visuals at the full board meeting, I mean, I thought that Andrew Ricci's comments were completely off base.
Yeah,
It's very important to be able to do that. I mean, and I understand, as Jessie said, we understood at the time that the reason we didn't have them at Fordham at Lincoln Center the other night was that their Lincoln Center's limitations on IT stuff, and not because we didn't want to. But I think in general, and maybe I'm with Paige on this, I'm not sure. I think we've generally been appropriate. I mean, if we have 10 slides, usually our co-chairs will present 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but not all 10.
Yeah.
And very important for people to understand. I thought at the end when Max, being helpful or trying to be helpful, said, oh, anybody in advance on the board can see things on the whatever that drive thing.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen. You know,
Yeah.
you're not gonna have 45 out of 50 CB7 members, including some committee members, are not gonna be looking at that stuff in advance. And the way to capture somebody's attention and get the best chance of getting the most informed vote is you show them what you're talking about, you give a brief description, you say what the committee did, and we should be very strong. to do
Yeah.
that.
There's a PS to that. If it is a complicated ask that they're wanting to extract for some godforsaken reason, the issue is that it's whatever the discussion is, if we go and walk, because I remember going and walking every single property before we even sat down.
I think we have to go back to.
Yeah, I think so in certain
But
cases.
again, that's
sure.
for the committee.
But the thing
It's
is,
not for full board.
Well, we
no,
can-
no, I just said that. And but But the other thing is, the more information that we can get from well thought out programs that come to us that are complete, the better we can help the community. And we lost some of that over time, not recently, but ago. And that has to come back because we don't want people to give us preservation light and then find out that the Brooklyn Bridge is right underneath this damn building or something. You know?
And I think that some of the comments made on Tuesday were inappropriate, obviously, but I do think they speak to this committee is not, we have applications come in, we respond to those applications. So the other thing I want to discuss in December is, well, what is the vision? And Madge and I have talked about this, but I think there is a lot more that this committee can do. I think it's high time we, on meetings like today where we can get through things fairly quickly, that we think about, are there people who we want to come in to talk? Is there we are the most landmark neighborhood in New York City. Is there studies that we should be looking at to see what the impact is? I mean, obviously, 2 years ago, we had an extremely controversial application that is going to come back to us on just right here, right? With West Park. Oh, right? Well,
they're in court now.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere, right? The building's still there, no one's happy. There are other churches and institutions that have similar problems. So the other thing I was gonna say is, in addition to dealing with the applications, I think there is an opportunity for this committee to do a lot more to understand what preservation means, to try to get non-committee members interested. And in an ideal scenario, I would love for someone to come to this meeting who is not tied to an application, because we are supposed to represent the public. And I don't think anyone from the public has shown up in God knows how long, not tied to an application.
We also have a great source, and that's
They
Kate,
come.
who's worked on church preservation and all the difficulties, and
Yeah,
I would love to hear more from him about
They
it.
give you a fabulous story. Maybe not in the confines.
Well,
I want to share that Michelle Parker's hand is up.
oh,
And then after she speaks, I want to just say something real quick.
Hi, I just wanted to say the other thing that I interpreted from what Andrew Rizzi said last night was that maybe, we're all very strong and very intelligent and vocal people, but maybe the committee members shouldn't argue at full board about an application. We have to come as a team. So that's what the other thing that I interpreted from what Andrew said.
But we don't always all agree.
Well, I think to the contrary,
I think it's
I
healthy.
had voted against the resolution that Kay presented. And had Kay's description not been so generalized, and had we had the drawings on screen at the full board meeting, I would have tried to make the case against that application, which I thought was ridiculous. I may in fact testify, probably not, because I may not get around to it, but I may individually appear at LPC and argue against that application. But I think it is, if we are not in agreement, that if we care about it, those who do on any particular one, that we be able to present opposing views.
I'm not suggesting you should not have said, well, in this case, I voted against the application for X reason. That's
Okay, so what are you saying, Michele?
but just it sometimes we argue at the meetings and it's sort of outside what happened. Sometimes we argue at full board and it's outside what happened at the committee meeting or didn't happen at the committee meeting. That's all I read into it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm not saying you shouldn't disagree with an application. You shouldn't vote, because your job, if you are not agreeing with an application, is to convince the rest of the board not to vote in favor of the application, and you have a right to do that. Maybe I'm not being subtle enough, but
We got it.
Yeah.
And I just want to add, in regards to the drive, there's many times that even though the applicant presents, they'll send me an updated, based on the meetings with you guys, they'll update. So that update, it's easier for me to upload it on the drive, then, you know, first of all, there's the sizing and then send multiple emails. So there's a you know, I had applicants submit 4 revised presentations to their plans. So I think it's easier for me to give that information and for you guys to have that information. And I know that the full board stuff goes out that Friday. Anyone could go into the drive and look at any of those materials and bring anything up. It's just a little hard when questions about what's being presented is being brought to us, like as we're setting up tech, you know. So it would be ideal if these materials are reviewed prior to the full board meeting. It makes it easier for us to support during the meeting, because it's hard for us to support the meeting and also hear you guys out.
In addition to that, if people would send in whoever's taking the resolution, please don't take too long to do it unless it's so complicated or there's a special reason. It really is greatly appreciated, because then it's the end of the month. They're ready to set up on Friday. You don't have the resolution to give them. That's not good. So can whoever takes the resolution, please get it done within a week or 2 and send it in so that we can forward it to Jessie.
Sure. And it's fresher in our minds then.
Yeah, and it's fresher in our minds. The other thing is, please let us know if you're not coming, because last year we had a lot of times when we did not have a quorum. I mean, we sort of fudged it by using the people online as the quorum, which you're not. So please let us know if you're not coming.
Great. Okay. Good. Excellent.
Okay.
Shall we adjourn?
Adjourn.
Adjourn. Yeah, exactly. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Our
Thank you.
meeting-
Who's done?
I will take care of this.
Oh.